as the final round of the PCA Club class comes up towards its final hour. Green flag in hand. We're ready to go racing at Imola. We're holding for a long time. Belair's waiting. And now the green flag waves and we're going. Here comes on the outside line. Ben Leung looking for that position immediately here as they go in towards turn one for the first time. Bit cleaner than last night. In towards the Tamburello chicane. Are they all going to get through here cleanly as they get on the brakes? Belair's just about stops in time. In the background, there is a couple of drivers off the circuit. I think I saw Snelling slightly wide, but he got onto the circuit okay, and will continue on. Down in towards the second chicane. It's a clean start from just about everybody in the first chicane.
I think some drivers may have had a brief off-track excursion, but either way, a very calm, cool, and collected start for these racers. Still going side by side, though, don't get me wrong. Heading down into Tosa, looking to see if anyone's going to try and get a move done a little bit farther in the mid-pack. Some drivers going side by side coming at it, though. That right there, I believe, is Richard Woodruff and Mark Foley side by side coming out of Tosa. Foley not having a good exit at all. He's going to lose out on another spot. That to Terrence Fong in a 388 car. Terrence getting that move done to slip his way up into 6. Mark Foley getting chewed up and spat out by his competitors. And Derek Derrickson may try and go for a move in the not too far off future.
Oh!
Attack being made.
Side-to-side contact. Peter Cummer into the side of Derek Dirksen, in towards Aqua Minerale, and somehow they get out the other side okay. Oh, and a big slide again as well from Peter Cummer there, as he just tried to get on the power out of Aqua Minerale. That was all over the place here. In towards the chicane. They'll all be really careful through here because we saw plenty of spins last night at this chicane, and this time round, at least in the top 10 or so, they get away with it. Well, side-to-side contact, it's not a place you want it at all down at Aqua Minerale. You're so on the edge on the cars anyway, even without contact with anybody else. Thankfully, we get away with it as we get towards the end of the opening lap.
Yeah, that section is usually terrifying in a GT3 car. You throw rain in the forecast and side-by-side racing and contact being made. I am really shocked that those racers were able to go through there without one of them ending up in the gravel trap around the outside of that section. As we follow Terrence Song in the 388 car, how far is that car in front of him? It's a rather significant gap. That's over a second between those two cars. The draft, the rooster tails coming off the back of that number 17 car of Snelling, they are just barely fully subsiding by the time they catch up to the front of Terrence Tong's race car. That shows you how wet it is out there on the racetrack still. iRacing marking the track as moderately wet as it stands currently, which is actually an improvement from what it was at the start of that formation lap. It was marked as very wet as they got this race well and truly underway. So a gradual amount of improvement in the first 3 minutes. Let's see how it shakes down in the next 57.
Yeah, a bit weird considering that it was moderate rain, supposedly. It was falling before. Although I suppose you wouldn't have very rain, would you? That wouldn't work. So I guess that's why. But yes, it's going to continue to dry like this, but the times are going to be the ones that are important. Obviously, don't have any realistic lap times here. And of course, we've got to mark our times next to the club class drivers, not the pro class drivers, who will, as expected, be going that little bit quicker than these guys tonight. That's Dirksen with a big slide as he got onto the curve on the outside for Aqua Minerale. These painted surfaces are not to be touched, and Dirksen very nearly felt the full effect of that there, as Piratella is the next to collect a victim. Is that no, it's Rex is it Rex Jerwala maybe? I think so. We will find out. The reason I'm pausing is because Ken Eskridge is a long way off the back of the field as well, but he started from pit lane, so that might be why he is all the way back there. As Derek Dirksen was seemingly a bit slow off of the chicane. Now onto the brakes of Rivatsa. He's okay, and he's still in 8th place.
And you brought up a very good moment you brought up a very good point a couple of moments ago. Had that backwards for a couple of moments there, but you brought up a good point. Talking about the painted surfaces around a racetrack like this brings me back to my karting days as we see the moment for Rex Jerwala in the number 7 car. That's a simple spin and wow. I think someone else joined him in an off-track excursion there. You can see a car very, very slow. That may have been Sherburne in the 155. Yes, it was going for a spin heading through that. A sympathy spin in response to the 7th, stopped on the outside of that corner at the exact same point in time. But I was going to mention the paint surfaces around a racetrack like this and conditions like this. It reminds me of my karting days. There used to be a big metal plate that I used to have to drive across one of the tracks we were running at. It was part of an old disused airfield up here in the Philadelphia area. And every single time we'd run in the rain, they would always say, don't turn heading through there, because if you do, it's basically going to act like a giant slip and slide. The painted sections of this racetrack are going to act very similar for these GT3 race cars. So they may be fast, they may be well-tuned race cars heading on the asphalt, but once they hit the painted sections, they're probably going to do a better impression of one of those Princess Cruises cruise ships.
Yeah, it's a real balancing act through Imola, I find, as well. A circuit that's already quite narrow. When you start to take away the painted surfaces, you're already sort of decreasing the track width by about 10% based on what you would normally use. So it is a very, very difficult balancing act. You're walking a tightrope through here as you're going on through every lap. And Derek Dirksen right now is applying a lot of pressure to Mark Foley. Careful on those inside curves too much. They will spin you around before you know anything about it. And it's even harder to catch at slow speed in these cars. So careful through the Variante Alto. He's got away with it. Now he can't see anything as he goes towards Raptor. This is Sigourney versus Leclerc. For 11th place, Robert Leclerc's going to be on the outside line here. And he's going to brake early, which is a good thing for everybody. Oh, Sigourney didn't know. That's exactly what happens when you go side by side in towards Ravata. Both of you ideally has got to brake early, otherwise you will be off into the gravel. That's what happened to Peter Sigourney, and he's down to 14.
And that braking zone heading off into the Ravata section, super, super tricky. You got the bend in the road, so it's super late to try and get the steering actually straightened up so you can finally get onto the brakes comfortably. And then along with that, you got downhill braking zone to contend with as well. Ravata and the braking zone that leads into it tests just about every single quality of a race car and tests every single thing that a race car does not like to do. Braking while turning, check. Braking while going downhill, check. Doing it side by side, check. And doing it side by side in the rain with all of that, check, check, and checkmate.
This is super, super difficult out here right now. 53 minutes still to go. Best lap of the race so far, 58.1 from Julio Velez, but we did see time dip immediately last night as well, but then they didn't continue to dip as quickly as I was expecting. I mean, we dipped into the 56s almost immediately, but it wasn't until we started to get down to the 53s or so that the dry line started to, dry tyres rather, started to be viable. Through Acqua Minerale again here for Dirksen, following Foley as closely as possible, and again, he's almost struggling not to hit him in some of these places. How is he going to work his way past? As I mentioned, this circuit not very wide anyway. When you're taking away such a proportion of the circuit with the painted surfaces, how on earth do you get through?
Prayer. I think that may be a good strategy for these drivers. Keeping your fingers crossed and sometimes even keeping your eyes closed and just hoping things go well. That's not going well at all for Ben Lung. He's lunged it off the circuit heading down into Ravata. Off the circuit in dramatic fashion. He's now dropping outside the top 10 nearly.
10th place it is for Ben Leon. It's the most difficult braking zone on this circuit. He's been hit by John Gibson. Oh, that's a big hit down there at the bottom of the circuit. Don't be surprised to see John Gibson into the pit lane serving a penalty soon. That is an almighty whack into the Ravata corner.
And I wonder if we can maybe take a look at another angle of that incident. This time maybe following Gibson. Just hear how quickly he was trying to bang through the gears and get it loaded up, heading off into there. Here is carrying way too much speed. As we saw that incident take place, I may have to look to see exactly how much of a pace disparity it was. But I think it was probably going about 30 or 40 miles an hour, way too quick off into that corner compared to Lung. Tough break for him as we take a look at that replay. Oh, he locked up the rears into the corner. That's what happened to him.
Sorry, just staying silent there so we could just, I was just listening in. Yeah, it was a sort of an initial snag of the brakes as well. These cars have ABS obviously, but it does not save you from everything, especially in the wet weather, as that's a big spin for Derek Dirksen, who's in the middle of the road here and he needs to get out of it, and he does. Oh wow, that would have been bad there, as the others went right round the outside to try and avoid. Steve Komatz was the first one on the scene who had to go around the outside, and he does get up into 8th place with Dirksen down to 14th. Let's have a replay of this one up over the top of the hill at Piatella. Exactly the same thing, almost. The puddle is what seals the eventual spin, but actually the initial is just a snagging of the brakes. When you initially slam on the brake pedal, have you got it quite right? Well, the answer on those two occasions have been no. And these braking zones are so long that you haven't crashed quite a long time after you've made the mistake.
It is a delicate act having to hit the brake pedal in these race cars. The amount of finesse these drivers are going to have to try and input into their sim rigs, super tough to try and nail down, as John Gibson in that 911 car has made that call to come into the pit. Not only does he have some rather big damage on the front end of that race car, he's also been given a black flag from race control. So penalty for Gibson. That's going to bring David Snelling up to second in the number 17 machine. Richard Woodruff now moving up into a podium spot in the 934 car. Julian Velas now leading this race by about 5.5 seconds. A just penalty for sure, but getting back to the point that it was racing, the braking zones in a situation like this, in race cars like this, it's a very hard act to try and nail.
It is. And that is a shame for Gibson. He drops down to the back of the field. No malice involved in that incident at all, but just an honest mistake. In terms of battle for second in the championship, by the way, I said I'd keep you updated over the course of the day. Terence Ton is going to be guaranteed that if he finishes in the top 6 today, and he is currently in 4th place, going well as far as that objective goes. This, meanwhile, is a battle for 11th place, 12th, excuse me, between Sigourney and Dirksen. Dirksen in the black and white, just in behind, trying to regain these places, and that's what most of the rest of the 3/4 of an hour is going to be for Derek Dirksen.
And we've still got a lot of this race left to go. Despite the drama we've had go on thus far, we aren't even 12 minutes into this 60-minute long race. It has had a lot of drama up to this point, and I gotta say, honestly, we're starting to see this track dry out rather quick. iRacing is still marking it as moderately wet, but compared to how it was a matter of about 12 minutes ago, there has been a significant upgrade in these track conditions. So these drivers maybe starting to get in their comfort zone, seeing this track begin to dry.
It's very close actually between Mark Foley and Peter Kummerin towards Rivazza this time round. I suppose it is between all these guys. That's a bit late on the brakes from Sigourney, but we'll get away with it. Goodness me, what is the right point to brake at when you're going down the hill there? So tricky. Sigourney's actually got a decent run here on Mike Madsen onto the front straight, but he'll be too far behind in towards Tamburello. This race just not quite having settled down yet, really. Lots of battles still going on out on the circuit. We're not reaching a stage in the race like you do normally see in these races, where you're waiting for the pit stop phase, trying to save fuel. Before that point, it's still going on here. Sigourney there, trying to get past McKinney, excuse me, not Mike Madsen. Just weaving around all over the place. Half in an overtake attempt, half in a defensive shape to Derek Dirksen just in behind.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what we could call that strategy, but it was certainly something that we saw on screen a couple of moments ago. Still a lot of close battling going on all throughout this field, despite the hecticness we've had since the drop of the green flag from Steve Komatz running in 7th at the moment. Go all the way back to, we'll just say, Peter Signori, who we're following right now in the 222. That's only about 4 seconds between those racers, so it's a pretty close battle, a pretty close field that we've got all throughout it at the present moment. Despite these challenging conditions, they call the rain the great equalizer, and I think that is certainly the case rather early on into this race.
It looks like it. That's a bit wide from McKinney, but he'll get away with that. You can get decent traction if you just straighten yourself up for one of these exits, especially through one of the up-the-hill exits, of which there are quite a lot in this season. Through the chicane. Oh, that's a nicer line from Sigourney, much nicer compared to McKinney. And, well, we see what's happened in the past when two drivers have gone side by side through into towards Ravatsa. So let's see what happens here. Who's going to back out? Do either of them back out here? They're both going to be late on the brakes here, and they're going to be worried about hitting Madsen. Oh, that was close. Mike Madsen would have been looking in his mirrors very nervously there, but Michael McKinney is overtaken. Security got it stopped just in time, and he's up into 11th place.
That was some real close battling heading off through the final sector of this racetrack. There's still nose to tail heading on to the start-finish straightaway. Will we see a driver try and get a move done heading off into the Tamburello chicane? Usually a premier overtaking opportunity, but in the rain, that can be a terrifying moment for these racers. Doesn't mean they're not going to go for it. Side by side, heading down into the braking zone. Who's going to win out in all of this? Contact nearly being made between those racers. Holy cow.
And Turkson hits the curb and spins himself through Tamburello. He just clipped the curb on the inside. He was trying to get Traxon down. He's only going to lose out to John Gibson, ironically, there. But that is costly again. It's McKinney who is trying to remake this overtake, and Sigourney who hangs on to 11th place.
And that is such an easy mistake to make in a race like this. And I gotta say, from my experience in these GT3 race cars, that sort of moment we saw a couple of moments ago can happen quite often. That's something I've experienced a lot. I like to call it a slow spin in a GT3 car, where you get in a sideways slide where no matter what you do, you can do anything with the throttle, anything with the brake, anything with the steering. Doesn't matter, you're going to end up either spinning, or the only way you don't fully spin out is because you're completely stopped. That sort of moment is so frustrating whenever it happens to me behind the wheel, and I'm sure pretty frustrating for that driver as well, as we nearly saw them come to blows heading down into Aqua Minerale.
Well, yeah, just 44 minutes to go in this race, and we'd like to remind you, of course, that we're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Well, we've had a very exciting first quarter of an hour here from Imola. Still lots more to come as the fastest laps continue to tumble in. 56.9 from Julien Velez already here. I'll suggest this circuit is maybe drying a little bit quicker than last night, but that last second or so for the dries to eventually come out was, it took a very long time to get here, let's put it that way. And we'll see whether it is the same here tonight. But so far, it is wet tyres all the way. And I imagine if these drivers would have seen last night's race, they're expecting to keep the wet tyres on throughout the remainder of the race.
I won't raise one thing talking about the ever going on evolution of this racetrack. We will reach a certain point in terms of the moisture level out there on the circuits where it gets a little bit dangerous. You know, you hear about some of these drivers who get maybe a little bit overconfident in terms of the conditions out there. The track's still a little bit too wet to kind of go for moves and dive bombs that you'd see in the dry, but just because it's a significant amount drier than it was at the drop of the green flag, these drivers feel confident enough to do it. I think we're kind of getting to that point slowly but surely where the track is still noticeably wet, but because there's been such an improvement since the drop of the green flag, these drivers' minds may get done in a little bit, and they may think, hey, I've got the grip, I've got the opportunity to go for it, so they go for a dive heading down into turn number 1, let's just say, and then the next thing you know, they end up in San Marino because they overshot the section so bad.
Yeah. It's not as much of a jump as you'd think. to end up in another country around here. Meanwhile, down towards Ravatsa, Mike Madsen close to Leclerc. He's going to get a better run than that because Leclerc there was just on the painted surface on the outside line, which most of the time you do want to avoid. As it dries out, maybe it is going to be somewhere where these drivers do venture, but that time was really quite wide from the 718. He looks like he's got away with it though. Mike Madsen is not going to be able to make a move into Tamburello. It feels finally maybe that after 20 minutes this race is just calming down a little bit, and with these drying track conditions getting slightly easier for these drivers as well. A few less mistakes creeping in after 20 minutes of racing.
You see, I commend your bravery there, Ewan, saying this race has calmed down. If I said something like that, it would probably be met in response with an asteroid coming down and ending up in one of the gravel traps around this racetrack. So I'm going to refrain from making any such comments. I will say, though, this field incredibly close despite all the drama that has gone thus far in the first third nearly of this race. We are rapidly approaching upon the conclusion of the first 20 of this 60-minute long race, and we're going to end that with maybe a side-by-side fight going on here. Look at Mike Matson trying to get a move done on Robert LaCroix. That was nearly side-by-side racing, but not close enough. Now down into Aqua Minerale, and we were mentioning the drawing up. Oh, look at that! He's gonna have to take a spin and the detour on the infield of this track. Credit where credit's due to the Matson. He may lose out on a spot, but he did not lose out on any body parts on his race car.
If he gets away, without losing a spot, then that's going to be outrageous. Through the chicane, as he cleared the slowdown, I can't believe that. That is absolutely fantastic from Mike Matson there to have the car control, to bring the car back over the grass and the gravel, to keep the exit speed up the hill and get away without a particularly heavy slowdown penalty. That is remarkable driving, and he's gotten away with it by the looks of it. Mike Matson retains the top 10.
I think if we went up to Mike Matson and gave him $1 million to try and recreate that, I don't think he would be able to do it. That was inches, literal inches. If he lost it a little bit before then, chances are he may have hit the inside wall. If he lost it a little bit later than that, it may have been turned into a glorified round of bowling heading down through the Aqua Minerale section. So Mike Matson definitely got away with one there in the number 6 machine, but just because he had that moment doesn't mean he's taking it easy. You can see him using a bit of the inside curb heading off through that Tamburello chicane. We mentioned the painted sections of this racetrack earlier on. One of those painted sections, of course, being the curbs around every single corner on this racetrack. We're starting to see those drivers get a bit more experimental and brave with hitting the curbs around here, which is a good sign that these drivers are hitting their stride comfort-wise.
39 minutes still to go here in this race, and they are just hitting their stride slightly, but those mistakes are going to be difficult to keep away for the whole of the race. Through Piratella they go, and McCraw stays ahead of Mike Matson, who's suddenly on the charge, even despite his run in these last couple of moments through Aqua Minerale. He'll make it a little bit easier through here, you would imagine. He did lose a car length or so on the way in, and that's to be expected, really. Next time he comes through out of the corner, and he'll look for his way past, but it's not going to be easy. Peter Sigourney's also looking for his way past. He's in the blue and yellow, as opposed to Matson in the all blue, just in 10th place. And LaCroix, you can see, whose fire is still burning despite the rain here this afternoon. Still got the fire coming out of his car. Here comes Matson in towards Ravazza. Another problem with the rain, of course, being that the line you have to take into Ravazza takes away one of the best overtaking opportunities on the lap, and that might be start to experience now by some of these drivers stuck behind Robert LaCroix.
Now, I want to raise one point talking about the overtaking opportunities that you see in a rain-affected race. It's basically just a complete shift. As much as a section like the Tamburello chicane that we're going to see these racers head down into in a couple of moments, usually the heavy braking zones, as much as they are great overtaking opportunities in the dry, in the rain, it's usually just a spot to have some sort of bad accident. And so you see these drivers tend to take it a bit easier there. But we're going to see drivers go for moves heading off into sections where in the dry you would have to be an absolute maniac to try and go for a move. Seeing some drivers go for the overtakes heading off to the Aqua Minerale section, which I think I harp on it a lot talking about that section, but it's a pretty good basis in terms of how this race has gone thus far. Not only can you see this track actively drying out, you can see these drivers getting more comfortable with their race cars and the track conditions. You can also see these drivers go for some moves in a section where if you go for the dive there in the dry, people would probably suggest that you go on a grippy sock vacation.
Oh, there's Matson having another look towards Aqua Minerale. No chance there this time around. And he'll continue to probe. Lap times, by the way, haven't spoken about them for a while. They're still in the 57s or so. We've only seen 156, and that came from Julian Perez, who's leading this race by nearly 4 seconds. 3.5 seconds it is right now, ahead of David Snelling. So we are a long way away from wet or dry tyre running, rather. And we might well see some pit stops at halfway today. I'll explain in a moment as Mike Matson comes around the outside of Leclerc. That's a brave move in towards Ravazza. Leclerc late on the brakes here on the outside. Might well try and hang around there, but Matson was equally late on the brakes. And in fact, Leclerc sent himself off the road almost there. Peter Ciccone comes through into the top 10. That's 2 places lost in one go.
If dropping down like a rock in the span of just a couple of moments shows you how quickly your fortunes can change in a race like this. One small little mistake. Look at that. I don't have a good feeling about that. That car ran wide, hit the curb heading down that start finish straight away. I was fully expecting that we were going to have to read out a driver smacking that outside concrete barrier. Thankfully, though, for Robert LaCroix, he was able to get away with that in the 718 car without any further incidents. He should probably go out and buy a lottery ticket after that, because hitting that curb, you can see the spray get kicked up from that car as a result. He got away with one there.
He's getting out of the way now and dropping down to 14th place in the field. Yeah, just to explain what I was going on about a few minutes ago, saw last night that some of the drivers actually, instead of taking on new dry tyres, actually took on a new set of wets, because the fronts especially were under pressure towards the end with the higher track temperature, of course, because it was drying, but also the lack of moisture to cool the tyres down, the wet tyres down. I do wonder whether someone at halfway, although there is a lot of traffic about, I suppose, which is the only downside, but someone at halfway might decide to change tyres, because it is the same fuel that you have to put in. That can be worked out, that's all fine. It's just about tyres here, really. We'll see, though, whether anybody does that. I wouldn't expect to see particularly early pit stops. Everybody keeping their eye out, of course, for any dry tyres that need to be put on later on. If the drying happens about 10 minutes earlier than it did last night, for example, then everyone will be on them towards the very end of this race as they check under 35 minutes to go. Derek Dirksen is looking a bit crumpled at the front end here, but his ambition's certainly not. He is looking for a position here on John Gibson, who's also missing his entire front end, actually, after contact down into this corner earlier on.
No, at least you won't have to worry about overheating. That's a certain. I will raise, though, talking about the ever-evolving track conditions in this race. The track temperature is continuing to shoot down. Now 62 Fahrenheit, that I believe is 16 3/4 Celsius. That's not very hot at all, and iRacing currently marking the track as lightly wet. So a continuing evolution from how it was right towards
Oh, my word!
Someone just had a huge crash there.
John Gibson. John Gibson's hit the wall so hard there, and he's going to get hit by someone else's. Oh, he was trying to get out the way. Crowd's coming at him in towards Tamburello. Oh, it's a terrible crash on the front straight for John Gibson, and Robert Leclerc has joined him as well at the very end of the episode. That is a disaster for both. John Gibson's already had a drive-through penalty, and he's had contact this afternoon as well. But that is the bit that's ended his season. He's just made side-to-side contact as he's coming down the straight with Derek Dirksen, and I don't really understand why they were running into each other. Leclerc couldn't decide where he was going, or indeed which way he should be going past Gibson, and he comes into the rear and hits him as well. This is how it happened from the air.
Oh, that I think is going to be taken a heavy look at from the race stewards. That was just a messy incident. Look at that. Trying to get out of the way, nowhere to go for the car right behind John Gibson, suffering one of the hardest crashes I've ever seen in my time doing iRacing broadcasts here at Imola. He hit the barrier in possibly the worst spot that you could have. It ricocheted him across the track. If he found himself in a bigger pack, that could have been an almighty impact for multiple cars involved. Let's take a look at this from Gibson's perspective, because this was huge.
There's not much he could have done. He hits the wall, and you can see him trying to get himself off the road here. I think Leclerc should have chosen the left-hand side, to be honest, to go past. But anyway, he will argue that Gibson was moving around unpredictably, I suspect. And we'll see how that's all viewed by race control, especially for Dirksen there. Is he going to be judged to have moved across to the right into the side of Gibson, which eventually caused that crash? These are some drivers not seen for a while. Richard Woodruff is at the head of a train for third place at a Terrence Tongue. Mark Foley and Peter Cooper actually in the light blue. You can just see in the background. So a nice battle for third place, although these positions haven't changed since we were last watching them.
Yeah, that they have not. I'm still going to be keeping tabs to hear if we have any sort of penalties from race control in the not too far off future. I'm sure they're taking a look at that moment, hang down the start finish straight away. But for now, though, we got 3-car battle for the P3 spot. Woodruff, Tong, and Mark Foley covered by a tick over a second. I believe it would work out to be about 1.2 seconds between all of these racers. And you also see in the back a shot there, still within view, is a 333 car of Peter Kummer. So that's going to be another car that we may have to talk about being involved in this battle in the not too far off future. Usually when it comes to a dry race, you have a different perception about gaps. The 2 cars that we see on screen right now, Terrence Tong in that Rexy inspired 388 car, Mark Foley right behind the 316. That gap, that's close enough in the dry. In the rain, though, that's basically a matter of millimeters between those two.
Down the hill in towards Ravazza. Is anything going to be doing here between these 4? Doesn't look like it. They've all nailed the braking zone once again here. And by the way, lapping consistently in the high 57s or low 58s, although 56.5 that time from Velez. Maybe we are getting closer to dry running here tonight. We'll see if anybody is going to take that gamble, or whether they are going to learn the lesson from last night that it didn't work, and they're going to take that forward into tonight as well. With just half an hour to go, we will remind you, of course, that Princess Cruises are the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. So, just less than half an hour remaining, and nobody's taking a halfway pit stop by the looks of things. Only Robert Leclerc has recently emerged from the pit lane, but that's because he's had a lot of damage to repair. Fortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing John Gibson again this season, which is the same. Peter Zagerni has just driven through pit lane, as far as I'm aware. Are we aware of why that might have been?
I believe that may be a penalty for him, if my memory serves me correctly. Looking through, Sigourney was given a penalty in the 222 car. That, I believe, was for an incident with himself and the 718 car of Laverne Pro. And also to note, John Gibson, who has left the session, picked up a black flag for that incident we saw with himself heading down that start-finish straightaway not terribly long ago. Here's a moment that we saw that gave the 222 car a penalty, and there we go.
I'm hoping we didn't see that, because I don't remember it. Okay.
If it makes it feel any better, I can't even remember what I had for dinner tonight.
I think that's the first time we're seeing that, because we're watching these guys, so that's fine. We're not going mad. Peter Sigourney indeed getting a penalty for that one. You know, just on it just looked like he'd done a really tight line into the Villeneuve chicane there, actually, into the second part, and it went straight into the side of Leclerc, as you say. Maybe that explains why Leclerc was a bit further back than I was expecting. And unfortunately, it's the double whammy for Leclerc, isn't it? Both that incident there, but you could argue if he hadn't have had that incident itself with Sigourney, then he'd been ahead of John Gibson and he wouldn't have been involved in his crash.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff that pops into your mind when it comes to a situation like that. You just think of the butterfly effect that can go down for you in a race, being like, if that didn't happen earlier on, I wouldn't have found myself in a spot for that to happen to me, and then it kind of does your mind in a little bit. But regardless of the series of events that transpire to get to that point, it still happened, and it doesn't matter where that anvil came from. If you have the dent in your head from it crashing down on you, that's what matters at the end of the day. As we continue to see these drivers battling, I want to note the continuing evolution of this racetrack. We're starting to see a dry line form at certain points of this track. The sun is peeking out through the sky. iRacing now marking the track as lightly wet, so clearly the drying of this circuit has accelerated a bit.
Looks like it has to me. Yeah, I agree. Times are coming down. 56.6 from Steve Komatz is the pick of the bunch last lap. That's the fastest lap of his race. Not quite the race. Velez has gone quicker. This is in towards Variante Alta again, and Terrence Tong is just allowing well, not allowing, but he's seeing a bit of a gap emerge in front of him now to Richard Woodruff. As I mentioned earlier, Tong only needs a top 6 to be confirmed as second in the championship this season with Bedley behind him. He needs even less than that now as they go in towards Ravazza. Pressure's being put on him though, and he cannot afford to make a mistake. Mark Foley was extremely close in towards Ravazza that time round. Now out of the final corner and onto the main straight. Foley slides his way through, and this is going to be close in towards Tamburello. He's got a decent run here, Mark Foley, former sport class driver, now permitted to tinker with the setups here in the club class on Thursday nights. Can he come through in towards Tamburello? Maybe with an inside line. There's a lot of puddles there. Got to be careful. And he doesn't go for it. You've got to be very wary offline about the puddles that are still very much there.
Yeah, and if we see these drivers decide to make that swaparoo over to dry tires, we're going to see them avoid the wet weather parts of this racetrack even more than they already are. Forget avoiding it like a snake. These drivers would be avoiding the wet parts of this track like the plague. That kind of rhymed for some reason. I'm not entirely sure if I should take credit for that or not, as we ride on board with Mark Foley in the 316 car, the Maverick region driver, currently running in fifth at the present moment. He's got Terrence Stong right in front. You can see that gap seesawing back and forth, going down, then going back up, then going back down, then going back up. These drivers currently locked steady in a very close battle to try and remain in the top five. You got Peter Kummer, who we mentioned earlier on, may have got involved in this battle. He is still kind of within striking distance, albeit that gap has ballooned between the 333 car and the 316. Also, Richard Woodruff and all of this has pulled away. But I won't raise you this, Ewan. The gap that Julian Velez had at the front of this field has shrunk by about half. David Snelling is reeling him in.
He is. 7 tenths last lap. I imagine same again this lap. He's closing quickly. 3 seconds rather. The current gap. We'll check back in with those, of course, when the leading battle comes about, if it does at all. As we go through, we're up to now with these guys on board with Mark Foley. As you say, Woodruff getting further away from Tongue, and you can see the mirrors there. Off, actually. Is he Peter Kummer? Is that just the mirror? He might have gone a bit wide, actually. Yeah, he's gone back to a second or so away. Not sure whether it was the angle that we were seeing from the mirror there at the top of the screen or not, but anyway, he is still 6th place. Mike Matson and Steve Komatz, meanwhile, are exchanging places for 8th, as again, there's a look from Foley. Meaningless in the end, no chance on the way through. Looks like Matson, though, is on his way past here, is he? Ahead of Steve Komatz, who was pretty quick a couple of laps ago, but not necessarily this latest time around. Indeed, Komatz is now behind Matson in towards Villeneuve. Tongue being put under pressure. Very narrow line there, forced upon him by Mark Foley. Now in towards Tozer, there might be a chance of going through here. Inside line, he knows that now's the moment, Mark Foley. He's pushed Terence Tongue offline for the first time. It's not worked this time round though. Tongue keeps 4th place.
And keeping calm, cool, and collected in all of that. In a situation like that, in a race like this as well, it is so important for these drivers that just try and not lose sight of everything in this race. You can lose out on one spot, you can lose out on 2. Just don't do your own head in, otherwise you're going to have a mistake that'll lead to you losing about 50. As we take a look, that's some bravery from Mike Matson running deep into the green paint, adding down that start-finish straightaway, some side-by-side racing action and contact being made nearly at terminal velocity, and credit where credit's due. Not sure who that was that Matson was side by side with. They barely even lifted out of all of that, even with that moment we saw not terribly long ago involving the driver who at one point was in this race and no longer is, of John Gibson. Despite seeing that not terribly long ago, they had contact nearly at top speed and they still did not lift.
Well, I'm not sure did those two actually see it themselves, because, well, it kind of feels to me, even if they did, it doesn't really matter to them. They're just going for it anyway, which is fair enough and exactly what we want to see. But goodness me, they were close to an accident there. And I'd imagine they'll be quite close towards turn 1 again here as they come out of the final corner. Matson and Komatz are way more willing to go at each other than these guys seemingly right now, who are fighting, I suppose, for a podium, but even so. Komatz and Matson are providing the entertainment just for now. 8th and 9th in the race currently. Now coming towards Tamburello, not too far behind these guys, and they will still be single file. A bit further down in the field, we are keeping a look here at Ken Eskridge, because Not because he's in 16th place, but because he could be confirmed as the overall clean driver champion tonight. Well, you might be wondering why, because we've still got 2 more races next week, and that is true. However, if he stays below 3 incident points for the season, then he will be champion tonight, and I'll just explain why. See, no more races at the end of this one for the club class, and because the clean driver award is based on incidents, effectively you can't get minus on a day, if you see what I mean. It is about keeping your score as low as possible. If his score's already lower than everybody else's at the end of tonight, then he will be champion. Next lowest is Alan Hales in the challenge class. He's got 3 incident points right now. That's 1 off-track picked up over the course of each 3 individual races, by the way. The maximum he's had in the 5 races that count is 1, so he's had a pretty remarkable season as well. But if Kenneth Scrooge continues the way he's going, he'll be the clean driver champion, and you can see that he's trying really hard to get it as well, because he's driving around all on his own in 16th place.
Yeah, he's going for a, well, it won't be a Sunday night cruise. It'd be a Thursday night cruise. See, it doesn't have the same ring to it, so I think we may have to figure out the best way. A safe driving cruise. There we go. That's the best way that we could say. But I will hold off on talking about any more cruise-related terminology as Mark Foley and the 316 cars come into the pits. I wonder if he's deciding to switch to dries.
Oh, be brave, I think, to switch to dries at this stage based on what we saw last night, but I've applaud him for doing it if he does. I reckon more likely is an early stop here to try and get himself ahead of Terence Tongue, maybe, for 4th position. It is going to be a pit stop we will just monitor on our own timing screens here. It's a battle for 3rd place in this race continues on. It goes to 13 seconds before he leaves pit lane, so he hasn't changed all 4, which suggests to me that he will have only maybe changed rear tyres, or maybe only fronts. 2 tyres only, but he'll be staying on the wets for the end of the race.
And I wonder how that call is going to age for him. Is it going to age like fine wine, or is it going to age like fine milk in the Nevada sun? Only time will tell to see how it goes for him in the final 20 minutes of this race. Now to 19 and a half. iRacing currently marking the track as lightly wet. Haven't even gone into them marking it as very lightly wet, let alone getting into mostly dry or anything of the sort. So I wonder if we will reach the point in this race where we will finally have a drier track. Certainly a lot drier than it was at the start, but it's not dry out there by any means. Rooster Tails still getting kicked off the back of these race cars. iRacing still marking the track temperature at about 62 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a tick under 17C, so not very good track conditions for these races. That's very slow coming out of the chicane. That right there, unless I am very much mistaken, was the number 55 of Nick Francis slow.
I'm not sure who it was. I'll take your word for that. It was certainly a lap cut. He was being put another lap down, or 1 lap down rather, by these drivers to make their way out of Ravazza now for another time of asking. Lap times are still not coming down with the quickness you'd expect. I mean, I'm not sure how much wet weather driving you've seen in iRacing since it was introduced over a year ago now, but feels to me like these sessions have taken a particularly long time, as that it was indeed Nick Francis, and he actually got help in that spin there.
Yeah, a little bit of assistance coming out of the chicane. That's a simple matter of one driver getting a terrible exit, the other getting an absolutely fantastic one. Not the first time I have seen that sort of moment coming out of the chicane around here, but I know you're going to ask me about my thoughts on some of my previous experience covering rain races and how they feel a little bit longer in reference to the races feeling a bit longer, or?
No, well, the main reference I've got is the iRacing special events, which obviously take ages, and obviously you can take a real full drying period there. But so I've just been very surprised by the length of time it's taking. You know, me and Joe were batting a couple of ideas around last night at the end of the race off air as to just why it was taking so long as well, because I can't really get my head around it, to be honest, compared to the other stuff that I've seen since rain was introduced just over a year ago.
I think there may actually be some credence to that claim there, Ewan. I got my tongue wrapped around my teeth about 15 times as we see side-by-side racing heading down into the chicane. That right there is Steve Comath getting that move done on Mike Matson. That's a job done to slip his way up into 7th. But as I was going to say before my tongue got wrapped around my teeth about 16 times, there is definitely a little bit of like psychological games that go on when it comes to a wet weather race in terms of both us as commentators and those drivers out there on the racetrack. Considering the incident, it feels like you have a 2-hour long race and the drama of a 2-hour long race packed into a 1-hour one, as a lot of drivers are saying that now is the time to pit. Julian Velez is coming to the pit. Terrence Tong is coming to pit lane as well. Mike Matson is coming to the pit as well, albeit he disappeared off of our screens there for a couple of moments, so I guess he had 88 miles an hour on pit entry.
The pit stops a lot more split apart tonight than they were last night, that's for sure, as Julian Velez makes his way out of pit lane. Nobody really up on the jacks here, keeping the same warm tyres seems to be the call. Based on what you saw last night, the dry tyres are not going to be of much use until the very final 5 minutes of the race, which is not much use to anybody here when you have to make the pit stops at more than 10 minutes from the finish. Terence Tung now comes out of the pit lane. He's in 10th place. He'll be hoping that these final 15 minutes are a road to 2nd place in the Club Series standings at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think he has a very good shot to do it. He just needs to hang on for the final 15 and a half minutes of this race. Lots of these drivers decide to throw in the towel. I can imagine some of these racers were holding out hope, waiting for them to just say, hey, you know what? I could put dry tires on. Let's do this. No drivers really seem to be doing it at the present moment, with only about 15 minutes on the clock. We haven't even gone out of the lightly wet stage in terms of iRacing describing the track conditions at the present moment. I think the track temperatures are just way too cold, and the field size, currently we have 19 cars out there on the circuit still running around, so that could be part of the reason why we have not seen that same track drying, as Michael McKinley has had some sort of moment. I wonder if that's him coming into the pits or whether he's had some moment in the 527 car.
Well, I can't see his car anywhere. He might have disconnected Michael McKinney. It's dropping down with no particular reason at all, just as he was going through Acre Minerale. His car's not off the road, so according to my time screen, he has disconnected from the race. Well, let's see then into the pit stop into pit lane rather for the final time for a lot of these drivers this season. What is going to go on here? Velez is surely going to retake the lead. Foley is still behind Tong by a second and a half or so. Leung another 2.5 seconds behind. But what about the guys who have just come in, like Snelly, who should be second, hit by some distance? He does get out not that far behind Velez, to be honest. There he is. That's going to be a chase to watch at the very end of this race. Will Richard Woodruff get into third? Well, Chris Sherburn's going to get through first, but he hasn't stopped yet. Will he stay ahead of Peter Kummer, who's the one who's really coming up quickly right now? Terence Tong is going to get up into the position ahead of Woodruff. Then Kummer, who's up just behind Woodruff now. And Mark Foley making the early stop has actually lost places.
Yeah, we're getting to the stage of the race where things are really starting to get spicy. These drivers have their pit stops in their rear view mirror. They won't have to worry about that. Instead, it's just going to be a heads-up fight out there on the racetrack. This is that treacherous stage of the race, though. I mentioned earlier on, talking about the track conditions evolving to the point where these racers maybe feel a bit more confident than the track should allow these drivers to be. The track is a lot drier than it was since the drop of the green flag, and is continuing to dry still. These drivers are starting to feel a bit more pressure in the final 13 minutes of this race. I just have a feeling this is maybe the most treacherous point of this event for these drivers.
It is certainly because of the drying circuit and the unideal tyres that these guys are actually going to be on towards the end. That's a big bit of contact with the curb there for Peter Kummer, and surely this is going to be Mark Foley's chance here. He's up to speed on these new tyres, don't forget. Well, not new tyres rather, but out of the pit lane, new fuel load. Tyres resetting back to the normal temperatures for Woodruff and Kummer, but it doesn't look like Mark Foley's been able to capitalise on this time around as he's been getting up to speed. So he will stay in 7th place, having lost time throughout the pit stop cycle. Let's remind you one last time, of course, in the 2025 Club Series that we're thrilled to have once again Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships, sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Well, what a grandstand finish we're going to have to the Club Series here this season. The Club Class here at Imola on Racebot TV. Just less than 3 seconds between Velez and Snelling at the front of the field. Chris Sherburne's still going on the same fuel load, which is a miracle in itself. He's third, ahead of Terence Tong. He's a couple of seconds ahead of Woodruff, and then you've got Peter Cummer versus Mark Foley. The battle we're following at the moment, a battle we might well be continuing to watch for most of the remainder of this race.
Yeah, we're going to be keeping tabs on a great many things in the final 11 minutes and some change of this 60-minute long race. We're going to be seeing Julian Velez try and seal the deal in this race. About 2.5 seconds is a gap between himself and David Snelling. Will he be able to withstand that challenge? I feel like it may not be fully game, set, match just because of my time being a blabbermouth into the microphone. The gap has seesawed back and forth. It was 2.5 seconds, dipped down to nearly only 2 even at balloon back at 2.8. So one thing to always raise about rain racing and rain racing commentary, we were kind of mentioning the point earlier on how these races usually feel like they go a little bit longer just because you have the same amount of drama in a race that's twice the length packed into a race that's only 1 hour long. You got that, and you also have the gaps that can just they can increase, decrease. They can do pretty much just about anything you can imagine in the span of even one singular sector around a racetrack like this.
Still 10 minutes to go for this all to fall apart, if it is going to, for any of these drivers. But they have seen that gap coming down so quickly because of that traffic that's just in behind him. But we'll see about that when Snelling comes through. Time last time around was a 56.1 from him, 55.9 from Snelling. We're getting right into the dry weather period now, and actually Dale Green has gone for it. He's in 13th place. Dale Green has gone for it. Unfortunately, his sector times are nowhere near it right now. It's probably still too early from him. We always respect someone trying something a little bit different, but once again, it looks like the dry tyres are not going to be worth it until the very final 2 or 3 laps of this race.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to work out too well for him, but hey, it will be a nice experiment to keep our eyes on in the final 10 minutes of this 60-minute long race. These drivers who are out there on the wet still sliding around like a bunch of declawed cats attempting to climb up an igloo. Steve Komatz, who we saw have a big sideways snap heading off into the Villeneuve chicane a couple of moments ago, certainly good proof of that.
Well, these conditions still difficult. In these, even in these dire moments now of this race and of this season, of course, as well. This is round 7 of 7 here in the club class at Imola. We may well be crowning a Clean Drivers Champion Award here tonight. We may, well, we certainly are crowning a club class champion, unofficially, of course, with Julian Velez already coming in today with an unassailable lead. He's finally going to complete the season, it looks like, with another victory. He's already won at Road America, but he would like another win to his tally. Much like the Pro Series, it's been a very sort of topsy-turvy season, if you like, as far as race winners goes. Andy Jenks won the first 2 races of the season, but hasn't returned since, unfortunately, in the club class. Ben Leung then won the first race. After that, Terence Tong has also won a race, as well as Julien Velez. And then last time out, Terence Tong getting back onto the top step again. But it's been the other races where Tong has unfortunately dropped points. As Chris Sherburne now finally comes into the pit lane from 3rd place. Here is Terence Tong. Just 50 points from Daytona. That was outside the top 20. Portimao outside the top 15 on that day as well, at just 140 points. That is not enough from the first 2 rounds, unfortunately. And even though he's had a very good end to the season, where he's not finished outside the top 5 in the last 5 rounds, he has given himself too much work to do to re-overtake Julian Velez.
Yeah, in a series like this, you have to be as close to flawless as you can possibly get. I mean, being flawless all the time, that's not realistic, but just minimizing those bad days and maximizing the good ones is super important in a series like this. With only 7 races, that's rather rare in the world of iRacing. Usually you see probably on average for a league, a race season of about, I don't know, we'll say 8 to 9 races, maybe a full iRacing season, so like 12 on the occasional 13 race season at most. As that may have been a slip and slide moment.
It was for Mike Matson. He goes around for a spin and Derek Turkson will overtake him. Matson will not lose his top 10, but again showing, even in these dying moments with the drying conditions, it is not any easier to keep your car on the road, and Mike Matson has dropped to position because of it.
Yeah, right as I was going to mention the slip and slide qualities of this racetrack. There we go. Around he goes. Does not go for a whole spin, but in the process of that's one of those spins where you basically have to slow down to a crawl to get that front end to cooperate with the rear end yet again. Have them be on speaking terms, which, especially in the rain, is a lot easier said than done, and certainly some of the incidents we've seen thus far in this race are going to prove that. I will say, though, credit where credit is due to the drivers up and down this grid, and I raise this right as Kenneth Eskridge is going down pit lane in the number 77 car. A very clean race here at Imola. A lot of these drivers were probably expecting this to be a bit more hectic than it has been, and outside a couple of high-profile incidents and some occasional one-off spins here and there, it has been a perfectly smooth 1 hour-long race up to this point. Granted, we still have 5.5 minutes left to go, but I'm still impressed.
Yeah, it's a long way to go even to get to this point in these 1 hour races in the Porsche Club America Sim Racing Series. This is Series 13 here in the club class. This is the second division of racing, by the way. Next week we've got the final of the club, the sport and the challenge class still to come. Those are both fixed setup series, and so the added challenges and differences that come with there as well. And they'll have different weather conditions as well. So while we've had conditions here that have been drying through the races, they'll have completely different conditions that we'll talk about on Wednesday night and Thursday night next week for the sport and challenge class. We'll be live on Racebot TV from 9 p.m. Eastern, I think it is. And that goes for both nights next week for the championship finales there. Meanwhile, still races to be settled here. Terence Tong has stolen third place and run away with it here, but can Peter Cummer get that fourth place here with Richard Woodruff just up in front of him? The Ravazza section is getting, well, not easier, but certainly more palatable for a bit of an overtake, and there's a bit of a look there from Cummer. He can't get through though. Woodruff protects the inside line and protects fourth place.
I would say in terms of how palatable it is to go for an overtake heading off into Ravazza, there has certainly been an evolution, but I would still say it's like going from gasoline to vodka. It's still not the most appetizing thing in the world to go for a move heading off into there, and considering that the track is still obviously wet with a lot of standing water around here, don't think that is going to change. We have finally broken into very light wet, according to how iRacing describes the track conditions at the present moment. Not going to get into the dry conditions though in the final 4 minutes, with even less than that now on the clock.
This is going to be the final 3 laps of the season. 3 to go as they cross the line there. Richard Woodruff continues to hold these guys at bay. How much is that going to be possible through the lap traffic now as well, especially as Peter Cummer begins to get a little bit more aggressive. He had a little bit of a look at the inside at Tozer there. He was never going to get actually down the inside, but he just wanted to get into the mirrors there of Woodruff and get into his head. Now towards Piratella, he will not do the same because this is an entirely different corner, but now with lap traffic in up ahead, this is getting even more difficult now for Woodruff to manage.
Yeah, it is getting to the point where for Woodruff, it's like balancing. It's like balancing on a high wire between 2 skyscrapers while also juggling chainsaws. It's getting tough for him in that 934 car. Finds himself in 4th at the present moment. Only has a couple of laps left to go to try and withstand the challenge, but there comes to a certain point where there's only so much you can do as much as there are many things that you can modify setup-wise on iRacing for these Porsche GT3 cars, you cannot edit the width of the race car. You cannot make it as wide as the racetrack itself. So for Richard Woodruff, it is going to be a pressure cooker situation that he finds himself in for the final few laps of this race.
And Foley being there as well is going to add the added complication here for Peter Kummer, especially in towards Tamburello this time round. He had a better run out of Ravazza really than the two in front of him, but he isn't close enough by the looks of things. If you wanted to make moves here, you're going to have to do it pretty soon. This is not like what we saw 20 minutes ago, where you could just wait it out. You've got to go for it now, with 2 laps to go in the season. That was a bit wide from Woodruff there through the opening chicane. Kummer, excuse me, will get a little bit closer. Foley gets a bit closer to him. Look at this in towards Villeneuve. He's again going to get in the mirrors by the looks of things, and not quite in towards Villeneuve. The pressure mounting. The final laps counting down on this season now.
We have certainly hit the LT Sassy section of this race. Lick the stamp and send it is what these drivers may have to do between now and the checkered flag. We're getting to the end of this race, getting to the end of the season as well, and there's little time left to try and get some moves done. So if you find an opportunity, you may need to wait up a little bit and then just go forward. We may end up seeing that before one of these drivers between now and the checkered flag. We will say, though, coming out of the corner a couple of moments ago, right before the shoot down into Aqua Minerale, so Peter Kummer and the 333 car run a little bit wide heading out of that section, as much as these drivers are getting a lot more adventurous with those outside curbs. I am still expecting one of these drivers to realize that a painted section of racetrack that is still wet will act like a slip and slide more than anything else, but we got barely any time left to go in this race. The final flat out blast at the end of the season. Let's see how it's going to shake out for the battle still out there on the circuit.
It's the very end of the season, and indeed David Snelling is putting that pressure on to Julien Velez at the very end here as well. Lap times are not even dipping down to what they were last night, to be honest. Even now, the dry tyres are not the ones to be on. Last time round, Dale Green still much slower than the others on the wet tyres right now. Onto the straight they come. Tamburello for the final time. Could be your best chance here if you're Peter Kummer, especially with the run that he's got onto the front straight here. There may be a chance. He has a look in towards Tamburello, but no. Woodruff has to pull the car over in defence for the first time in ages, but it doesn't really matter. He still holds on to 4th place. Or does he? That was a little look from Kummer there, a bit cheeky towards the end of the Tamburello section. Here comes Mark Foley now, as his momentum's just coming on the up now. In towards Villeneuve. They all stay the same. Goodness me, that was close.
Yeah, that could have ended in an absolute disaster a couple of moments ago. I was thinking, no way. Oh, boy, that was near disaster. Heading off into Tosa, these drivers are getting even more adventurous with the moves that they are attempting, or at least looking to attempt on each other. May see a move around the outside for Mark Foley. That's going to be intense.
He's in the puddles on the outside line there as well, but luckily for him, they've evaporated a little bit. Outside line for Piratella is going to be too wide from Foley. He's not going to get through there on Peter Kummer, and that might well be that for this battle now for 4th place, unless there is something else here in towards the final corner.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get that job done. Julien Velez is on track for the win and the championship here this season, but that battle a little bit farther towards the back end of that top 10. Still going to be incredibly intense, hanging their way off through the chicane. No swapperoos there. Let's see how it works into Ravazza.
Foley's going to be nudged knocked backwards there as well, as into the final corners come the leaders. Julien Velez is going to win for a second time this season, and he's going to be unofficially crowned our Club Series champion with a win here at Imola as well. Over the line, Julien Velez wins in the rain by just over a second, or just under a second actually at the line, ahead of David Snelling. And the battle for 4th on the bottom of your screen, it will stay the same. Woodruff beats Kummer to the line. Foley's early pit call doesn't work in the end. It's a close run thing and a good battle as well, but Woodruff survives the pressure.
Yeah, and it was a brilliant race here at Imola to be able to crown the champion in the form of Julian Velez, a driver of the 33 car, going to win it at the end of all of this. And it was a close challenge towards the end for David Snelling. Credit where credit's due to the driver of the number 17 machine. The fact he was able to keep Julian Velez honest. He didn't allow him to drive away off into the distance and grab that championship. No, he kept him honest ever since the drop of the